about experiencing wealth or the wealth of inner poverty. Now, I'm definitely going to live up to my claim of going deeper. This is one of my favorite kinds of conversations because it is counterintuitive and paradoxical, I think, which I think most deep truths are. Like, what does it mean to experience the wealth of inner poverty? What does poverty and wealth have to do with each other? It's a subject that's actually been talked about for thousands of years. I think I first became aware of it through Jesus, through the teachings of Jesus, and him talking about, one of the famous quotes, the poor of spirit shall inherit, or the poor of spirit shall inherit the kingdom of heaven, or something like that, right? Poor of spirit, what does that mean? Well, today we're going to talk about it, and I hope that I can help illuminate that for you. It's a very rich and deep conversation, and a very important one. Before I do, if you enjoy these videos, I ask that you please hit the subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube and you haven't subscribed yet. Hit the like button. If you're watching on Facebook, please like the video, like my page. Leave comments. Comments are awesome. So I thank you for that in advance. Now, I thought I would share how I came about thinking about talking about this subject. And it came through my daily ritual, my morning routine, which is where I really focus most of my spiritual practice, if you will. I do that in the morning before I start my day. And I get up before the sun rises, quite early usually, and do a few things, make myself some tea. And then the first actual spiritual engagement, you might say, is I do contemplative reading. And that is where you take a sacred text and you read a passage, or it could be anything actually, but you're reading in a different way. You're not trying to get to the end of something, or reading for the sake of entertainment or anything like that, or even for the sake of knowledge. Like, you're not trying to gain anything. It's actually a way of awakening something within you. And I was engaging in that practice one morning, and I came across this passage from Rumi. And I think it does such a great job of giving you context, giving you a feeling sense of where we're going to go in this conversation. That's why I thought I would share it with you. Water in the boat is the ruin of the boat, but water under the boat is its support. Since Solomon cast the desire for wealth out from his heart, he didn't call himself by any name but poor. The stoppered jar, though in a rough water, floated because of its empty heart. When the wind of poverty is in anyone, she floats in peace on the waters of this world. When the wind of poverty is in anyone, she floats in peace on the waters of this world. The empty heart of the jar. This starts to give you a sense of what we're talking about when we talk about inner poverty. Now, before I go any further with inner poverty, let's talk about what we mean by wealth, right? Because if I baited you by thinking we were going to have a conversation of abundance and prosperity, you probably are going to be disappointed in this conversation, because I'm not going to talk about that. It doesn't mean that's excluded, strangely enough, and actually excitingly enough in a way. Like, in other words, when we experience the wealth that I'm going to talk about, sometimes monetary wealth will certainly accompany it, and it doesn't have to be left out of it. Neither does this sense of poverty. Meaning, you could have plenty of money. Solomon was one of the richest men in history, right? But he lived his life through poverty, in the sense of poverty, inner poverty. Inner poverty. What does this mean? What does this mean to have an empty heart? And why would we want it? That's part of this is the counterintuitive nature of it immediately, right? In a certain way, I don't know where you are in your spiritual practice in your life, whether this makes perfect sense to you or whether it's confusing. I know it befuddled me for many, many years. That was until I would read something like what I just shared with you from Rumi. There's something in that. He does such a great job. This is part of why it's so worth my time every morning to spend a few minutes. It's probably 15 minutes tops, that I'll pick up a text. Obviously Rumi's one of them, the Bible, the Bhagavad Gita, these are some of my favorites. The Tao Te Ching is one of my favorites. These are ancient ones, but sometimes too, they're more modern people. I can pick up Eckhart Tolle, as I talked about in the last stream, and just find that passage that opens your heart. And when I read something like Rumi, like I just shared, even when I didn't understand it, even when I didn't live it, maybe is more what I'm trying to say, it was the beginning of an understanding. It's part of what I would love to accomplish here today with you. To give you, if you're not familiar with it, to awaken that feeling of what does inner poverty mean? And if you are familiar with it, to encourage you to go deeper. This sense of inner poverty, to be poor in spirit, to have an empty heart, is a powerful experience. And you've experienced it many times in your life, whether you realize it or not. Anytime that you've willingly, that's a really important part of what I'm going to say, made yourself vulnerable, you did that. When we make ourselves vulnerable, we approach this space of inner poverty. Now, it goes even deeper than that. This is what I mean. So, if you're familiar with this, then actually, or if you don't, keep going. It goes deeper. But to be open, to be empty, why? Why be that? Because only then can the wealth of what we're surrounded by enter. The simplest way to put it, as I often said, I said it in the blog that I released this morning, you can't receive something new if you're holding on to the old thing. If you're trying to give me something and I don't let go of this book, I can't receive it, right? An empty heart, one of the first most practical reasons to pursue it, to open to it, to get interested in what the heck does that even mean, is this realm. Meaning that the more that you're empty, the more that can be poured into you, as they say. And the more that you don't hold on to whatever is being poured into you, the more that can be poured in. This is the aspect of life that is a becoming. Life is a becoming, right? So in other words, it's always happening. It's always changing. The more open and empty we are, the poorer we are in spirit. The more purely this experience can pour through us. And we become a reflection of that perfection. To be poor. Why poverty? Why this word? I just released the blog, like I said, and actually I did put a link in there because I knew I was going to talk about it. There's no way I wasn't going to have it. And so you can read the blog by the link in the description, just to say it. But in there, I reflected on autumn. It's probably my favorite season of the year. And of course, I don't think I'm alone. There's so many reasons to love autumn. But part of why I love it is you can feel there's a depth to autumn. And part of the depth, the poignancy of it, is because it is centered around dying in a certain way, right? Things are changing. Everything is coming to an end in a way. We know we're approaching winter, that still quiet time. And in order for that to happen, things go through this transition of dying. The leaves die and fall to the earth, right? Why poverty? Why such a strong term is death? Often in Christianity, they'll talk about dying to the self. This is the born again experience in a certain way, right? Why such strong terms? I really think it's important to realize why. It's because the part of us that needs to move, the part of us that likes to hold on, right? Can you feel that? The part of us that likes to hold on, the part of us that likes the concept of wealth over poverty, is the part that needs to open, is the part that needs to die. It's strong terms, and we say, and it needs to be extremely poor in that respect, that part of us. And we pick these words because it helps point to that part of us. That part of us doesn't like it. Clue. Can you feel it? This is how we start to sense where to look. The part that wants to receive wealth and not have poverty. Now, of course, that's true for all of us, right? Let's make sure that that's really important. I'm not trying to glamorize poverty. Anybody who's experienced poverty, which actually I have in my life, knows it's not fun. It's not a game, right? It's not anything to put up on a pedestal in a way. And I'm not trying to talk about that kind of poverty. We're talking about this inner poverty. This inner poverty of where we're not holding on to something. The empty heart is open. To open is to allow, as I already said, these things to come through, right? But there's a part of us that wants to hold on to. If we have a cool experience, if we have a really cool spiritual experience, God, we want to hold on to it. What part of us wants to hold on to that? You can turn your spiritual practice into that. That's why we emphasize these words, and I say we, I mean the great masters of the past, right? They chose words like poverty and death. They're strong. They hit us sideways. There's a part of us that doesn't like it. But that's the clue. If you really open to poverty, to this inner poverty, you'll feel it, and you'll sense that there's a great beauty to it. It's this openness. I keep using that word, but I don't know a better word. This emptiness that's incredibly receptive. Receptive. How else are you going to receive wealth? You must be receptive. From that space, it comes. A deep wealth. Like I said before, too, we all know that money can't buy us love and it can't buy us happiness, right? So we're not talking about that kind of wealth. Why? Because that's the kind of wealth that the little us likes. It feels like that's going to solve all the issues, right? Get the outside world settled and everything will be good. But we have example after example. Every celebrity that has a meltdown in front of the whole world, right, is a perfect example. They have everything. They have everything. But they don't have this inner poverty. They don't have this inner wealth. That's because they thought the outside world was going to provide it. This inner poverty is coming to grips with the fact that that's not how it's going to happen. I was starting to say that there's even our spiritual practices can become a trap for this. I'm going to share a story that I actually told in the blog because I think it's very relevant and kind of fun. Again, it's like the context, right? It gives you a feeling sense of what we're talking about. So the story is about a very accomplished Buddhist monk who was in one of the greatest Buddhist monasteries known to the Eastern world. And he had mastered the art of meditation. He could meditate for days, no food, no water, and be still and be at peace. He had memorized all the sutras. He could recite them by heart. He barely ate small, tiny meal of rice and a few little morsels. That was his whole meal for the day. And yet he knew that he had not accomplished the great goal, that he had not reached enlightenment. Now, nobody in this temple seemed to be able to help him go any farther. So one day he heard rumor of this great master who lived up in a cave. And he was said to be so pure that his whole body glowed with a light. So he set out one day to find this master. And after many trials and tribulations that traveling does bring about, one night he saw a glow on top of the mountain, and he knew that has to be it. That has to be him. He found his way up to the mountain and entered the cave, and there sat the master on a simple log, seemingly staring off into the distance. He prostrated himself down to the master and he said, "Please, sir, I've heard of your great mastery, of your ability to exude light. I saw it from a distance and I knew you were the master that could help me. I have mastered the art of meditation and I know the sutras by heart, and I've lived a simple life, and yet I still have not received the great gift of enlightenment. Please help me. I know that I'm a worthy student, and I'll do anything that you ask. Guide me." The master looked at him. After a few moments of silence, he said, "I'm sorry, son, I cannot help you." And he couldn't believe his ears, and tears started to well up in his eyes. And he's like, "Please, I'm telling you, I know that I'm a good student, that I can be here for you in any way that you need, and that I am ready. Please teach me." He looked into the master's eyes again, and he could see that he was getting nowhere. And the master said, I'm sorry, son, I cannot teach you. You know too much already. What could I give you that you don't know already? Please go." The monk started to cry. A couple tears streamed down his eyes. He could feel the pain of this rejection welling up in his chest and approaching his throat. And at that moment, the master saw this. And he said, "Look, I can't give you anything because you already hold too much. But I will tell you this, that who is it that knows he's mastered meditation? Who is it that's memorized all the sutras? Who is it that knows that I can teach him? Who is that one? You must die to him in order to cross the river into nirvana." It was at that moment that this Buddhist monk burst into tears, but at that moment he surrendered because he saw what he was talking about. He saw what was at stake, and it was everything. He had to die to this person who had mastered everything, to this impulse to master, to own. Can you sense it? And it was at the moment of his surrendering that he received freedom. It's a dramatic story. And when we say words like poverty and death, they're heavy subjects. But no matter where you are in your journey, there is something that you're holding on to that you know already too, right? That you know has served its purpose. Are you willing to let it go? To let it fall to the earth and die like the leaves in autumn? Now, these things can be, this is a dramatic story of, liberation, right? Of enlightenment. But we're not all even looking for that, but we might be looking for a better relationship in our marriage with our child. If we're experiencing something there that's troubling, that's challenging, I can guarantee it's because you're holding on to something that needs to be let go of. This concept of what it should be, this concept of what they should be, of what you should be. None of this is poverty. See, inner poverty is not knowing. And I know that that's not comforting sometimes, but try it. open to it? What is it that I think I know? Right? Like the Buddhist monk, I know I've mastered meditation, right? I know the sutras. What is it that you think you know that you might be better off letting go of? Now, here's the funny thing too. Remember how I mentioned that, you could have lots of money and still experience this inner poverty. It doesn't necessarily get in the way at all. Well, how can that be, right? Because that's owning so much. It's because you don't identify with it. This is one of the first and key factors to having this inner poverty, this freedom from that sort of bondage. If you feel like you are your wealth, right? Like if you're nothing without your wealth, then what happens when you lose your wealth? Right? Security's gone, right? You're a slave to keeping that. If you're a people pleaser and everything depends on how people think about you, you're a slave to that, right? This is not inner poverty. This is like inner searching or grasping for wealth. But we won't experience that inner wealth that I'm trying to share that we actually want, right? But when we want somebody to like us or love us, it's because we want to feel good inside. It'll never come from that way. Or when it does, it's very brief. It's fleeting because it's dependent upon something. What if that something is taken away? As I often say, though, I have good news for you. This inner poverty, you have it. This inner poverty that leads to real, true inner wealth, it already exists. You just can't be afraid to open to it, to allow it, to let it go. This grasping sense. Can you feel that? Water in the boat is its demise, right? As Rumi said. That's us trying to gather things. But water under the boat, leave the boat empty, and it floats. No matter what the trials and tribulations, that's what he was saying too, right? No matter how the water is, the stopper jar, the jar that's closed up with its empty heart floats. Because it's open. It's receptive. It's not afraid. This is inner poverty. At its beginning, actually, like I say, it goes deeper than that. The deepest aspects of inner poverty is emptiness. That's think about it, right? When you open, what is that? All of a sudden, emptiness. Well, what is so cool and so good about empty, right? I've said this many times. I often talk about space. Now, I've said it already, but I think it deserves repeating, right? This is what holds everything. And this space, this emptiness, this inner poverty exists within you. And when you get in touch with it, you can hold everything. I hope you can feel it. It's an amazing experience. And I think I can feel it right now. So that the moment you try to hold something, you lose it. That's why it's like you have to remain in that space. The wind of poverty to blow over you. And it comes in, and it comes in, and it comes in, and it comes in, and you're not holding it, so it could just keep coming. There's no end to it. One of the simplest ways for you to begin to experience something like this, if this interests you already, if you haven't turned it off, is to find that thing in your life that has served its purpose. I know there's plenty of things in my life, like some of my spiritual practices. They were very relevant and important at the time that I did them, but they don't fit anymore. They're not necessary. And if I kept trying to hold on to them, they actually just interfere. They make your spiritual life stale, actually. not as vibrant, not as full, not as rich, because you're trying to repeat the same experience over and over and over again, right? So, I said this, but there, again, it could be some part of your relationship with someone. It could be some part of yourself. Like, hey, I'm going to be 50 next year. If I try to hold on to my youth, it'll end up making me miserable. My youth is on its way out. And that's okay by me, honestly. It's exciting, actually. Every day that happens, certain things change, right? Certain drives change, certain interests change. But it opens up a whole nother world. This is my own experience. And I don't know if you can feel this. This is why it's like there's no limit to where there's no place this doesn't touch in your life. I encourage you to look for that place. This is autumn. It's fall. It's time to embrace the season and open to what it is that you might be able to let go of. And you'll glow as beautifully as the fiery maple trees that I have all over the property right now. They're stunning. I look forward to seeing your glow like that, from this release, from this letting go, from this inner poverty. As always, I thank you for your time. It's precious.